UFOs, unidentified flying objects, are real.
I'm not telling you that. The United States government is telling you.
It is believed that there are at least 100 billion planets in the Milky Way.
You need to know that the Milky Way galaxy has got 200 billion stars. Most of those stars now we know have planetary systems.
The galaxy we live in. That's an enormous number of planets in just one galaxy.
We estimate there are something like 20 billion Earth-like planets, or potentially Earth-like planets, in the Milky Way galaxy alone.
Now, if we consider that some studies estimate there could be as many as 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, it doesn't seem impossible that one of those planets might host an alien civilization somewhat similar to ours.
So I do think it's possible that at the moment there's one civilization in the Milky Way.
Unfortunately, reaching those planets and exploring them up close is well beyond the capabilities of our current technology. For now, piloted space exploration seems limited to a few billionaires treating it like their personal playground. And, of course, competing over who can build the biggest and most durable rocket. But what if there is an alien civilization out there with technology far more advanced than ours, and they already visited us over 70 years ago? According to some residents of Roswell, New Mexico, that's exactly what happened in 1947. They claim that an extraterrestrial flying saucer, along with its alien passengers, was recovered by the U.S. government after it crashed in the desert. This event, now known as the Roswell Incident, is considered by many to be the largest government cover-up in history. To uncover what really happened in Roswell all those years ago, we'll need to sift through layers of deception, buried under more deception, and sprinkled with red herrings by people who seem oddly deceptive themselves. Yes, this story is a strange one, so buckle up for a classic mystery. And just to warn you, there's a lot of deception involved. On June 24, 1947, amateur pilot Kenneth Arnold was flying solo over the scenic landscapes of Mineral, Washington. Arnold had been hoping to locate the wreckage of a missing plane, hoping to solve the mystery of its disappearance and claim a reward. Although he didn't find the plane, Arnold witnessed something on that flight that sparked a nationwide fascination with UFOs. He claimed to have seen a bright bluish light flash across the sky, followed by 9 flying objects moving together at incredible speeds and performing maneuvers that were beyond even the most advanced military aircraft of the time. Later, when Arnold spoke to the press, he described the objects as moving like saucers being skimmed across a lake. However, this relatively simple comparison was misunderstood, as some believed Arnold was describing the actual shape of the objects. The following day, his sighting made headlines, introducing a new term that would become ingrained in popular culture: flying saucer. Arnold's UFO sighting was one of the earliest to be documented in post-war America, and his standing as a well-known businessman made it difficult for many to doubt the truth of his account. The story spread rapidly, sparking numerous similar sightings. Soon, it seemed there wasn't a day that went by without someone claiming to have seen an object in the sky that appeared to be from another planet. Whether there was truly a surge of UFO activity during that period, or if the public's anxiety over post-war nuclear tensions between the U.S. and the Soviets led to heightened awareness of strange objects in the sky, remains unclear. What we do know is that this widespread unease would soon reach a climax near the small New Mexico town of Roswell. A few weeks after Arnold's flying saucers had captured the public's imagination, a rancher named Mac Brazel was about 80 miles northwest of Roswell when he came across something unusual in the desert landscape. There, in front of him, was what Brazel described as a large patch of bright wreckage, including rubber strips, tin foil, and a tough, paper-like material along with sticks. Materials that seemed more like the makeshift repairs of a careless landlord than parts of an extraterrestrial craft. He alerted the sheriff to his find, and the sheriff contacted a nearby Air Force base. The news worked its way up the military chain until it reached Major Jesse Marcel, an intelligence officer. Marcel, who had been involved in the American military's atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll, was tasked with visiting the crash site and recovering any materials. Given his background, it seemed he was the ideal person to handle the situation. However, Marcel was just as confused by the wreckage as Brazel had been. After the wreckage was recovered and further examined, the Air Force issued a statement announcing that they had found a mysterious flying disc that had crash-landed in New Mexico. Naturally, this only served to fuel the growing UFO craze sweeping the nation. The very next day, the Roswell Daily Record published a report about the wreckage, complete with the dramatic headline, "RAF Captures Flying Saucer on Ranch in Roswell Region." Granted, headlines back then weren't as punchy, and they didn't feature the usual puns, but it was enough to stir up a frenzy among the locals. It's important to clarify, though, that flying saucer didn't mean the Air Force was admitting the wreckage was from extraterrestrial origins. It simply referred to the recovery of an unidentified flying object. That said, releasing a statement that strongly suggested they were in possession of a UFO was probably not the wisest move. As you might imagine, there were plenty of higher-ups in the military who weren't thrilled about how Brazel's discovery was being handled. Before long, covert efforts were underway to control the growing hype surrounding the incident. A military official, General Roger Ramey, asked to see the wreckage for himself to determine if aliens were really planning to invade Earth by crashing their expensive spaceships into the sand. When he finally examined the wreckage, it turned out to be surprisingly mundane. In fact, it matched exactly how Brazel had initially described it: pieces of rubber, tape, foil, and wood. The Air Force issued another statement claiming the wreckage was from a weather balloon. The Roswell Daily Record followed suit, apologizing for jumping the gun. Soon after, Mac Brazel, the man who discovered the wreckage, admitted he felt foolish for causing such a stir and expressed regret for reporting it in the first place. With all those loose ends tied up, America seemed to forget about the Roswell incident and shifted its focus to other cultural phenomena. Fast food-eating clowns, Elvis Presley's hip movements, nuclear-powered cars, and women in bunny outfits. Yes, the 50s were a bizarre time. And just like that, Roswell seemed like an open-and-shut case. In fact, the incident faded from memory for a solid 30 years. In the 70s, a nuclear physicist and professional ufologist, yes, that's a thing, named Stanton Friedman, decided to take a fresh look at the Roswell incident. He quickly discovered that some shady dealings had occurred, involving powerful and secretive figures back in 1947. As Friedman dug deeper, he uncovered that the Roswell incident was far more complex than the American public had been led to believe. He started his investigation by interviewing Jesse Marcel, the Air Force major who had been one of the first on the scene of the crash. You might have expected Marcel to simply confirm the official version of events, but what Marcel shared with Friedman was nothing short of extraordinary. Marcel revealed that, back in 1947, he had been instructed to keep quiet about what really crashed in Roswell. He described finding a strange, foil-like material among the wreckage. Marcel had handled this material himself and recalled how it was extremely thin and completely weightless. The most bizarre part was that he couldn't bend it, no matter how hard he tried. The material was also resistant to dents or scratches, and Marcel was no stranger to metals. As a military intelligence officer, he was familiar with all kinds of materials used in aircraft construction, and this substance was unlike anything he had ever seen. His only conclusion was that the material, and by extension, whatever had crashed in the desert, was not of this world. Naturally, Friedman was eager to learn more, and he continued to interview over 100 Roswell residents and witnesses. Many of them confirmed Marcel's account, with some even claiming to have seen alien bodies being recovered from the crash site. After Friedman published his findings, public interest in the Roswell incident was reignited. As time went on, conspiracy theories about the incident gained worldwide attention, and the town itself became something of an extraterrestrial theme park, with UFO shops, themed cafes, and bars dotting the desert landscape. Roswell fever only grew throughout the decade, peaking in 1994 when it was brought to light. The official government files on the incident were declassified and released to the public. Incredibly, the documents showed that Roswell was, in fact, part of a cover-up. But hold your excitement, because the official report claims that the weather balloon explanation was fabricated by the military to divert attention from a top-secret research project that was taking place during the Roswell crash in the late 1940s. This project was known as Project Mogul, and its goal was to develop a high-altitude, covert listening device capable of detecting nuclear missile launches from thousands of miles away in mere seconds. You see, post-war America was a nation gripped by fear. The global balance of power was being reshuffled, a tense moment made even more volatile by the introduction of nuclear bombs. America had, of course, dropped 2 on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so it was well known that the U.S. had the capability to produce nuclear weapons. However, it was still unclear whether or not Russia had successfully developed this destructive power, something that, to put it mildly, made America uneasy. And that's where Project Mogul came into play. The project aimed to send microphones into the stratosphere using high-altitude balloons, similar to weather balloons, to detect sound waves from Soviet atomic bomb tests. It was based on the fact that underwater microphones had already been in use at the time to detect explosions from long distances across the oceans. The balloons involved in Project Mogul were massive, much larger than standard weather balloons, and made from a tough polyethylene plastic, which could easily have been mistaken for something extraterrestrial when found by a rancher crossing the desert. These balloons were also equipped with highly advanced, state-of-the-1940s microphones and radio transmitters, which, to someone without the proper knowledge, could have appeared as advanced alien technology. This all sounds pretty plausible. Project Mogul and its advanced balloons were indeed real, and they just happened to be tested in the desert near Roswell. But it does seem somewhat ironic and suspiciously convenient that the whole weather balloon story ended up being a cover for, well, just another weather balloon, albeit one with a few more bells and whistles. It's almost as if, in 1994, the government realized they needed a cover for their cover, and figured we'd all fall for it with the line, "Hey, those regular weather balloons over there, forget about them. We made those up. It was actually one of these fancy weather balloons that crashed in the desert, and definitely not a UFO." If you buy that, the classified documents offer some explanations for the wreckage, though they don't do much to clarify the strange materials found at the site. But what about the alien bodies witnesses said they saw in the desert? In 1997, the U.S. government released a report stating that crash test dummies had been used to study the effects of parachutes on humans by dropping them from airplanes over various drop zones, one of which happened to be Roswell, New Mexico. The sight of these dummies being recovered by officials could easily have looked like alien bodies being retrieved from a crash site, especially with the UFO hysteria surrounding the event at the time. On March 13, 1997, residents across Arizona, Nevada, and even parts of Mexico reported seeing a massive formation of lights moving across the sky. The sightings became so widespread that it wasn't just a few people seeing something unusual, it was thousands of individuals, all with the same description: a V-shaped or delta-shaped formation of lights. As night fell, people in Phoenix, Arizona, began to notice strange lights in the sky, one by one. By the time these lights reached the city, the number of people witnessing the event had swelled to the thousands. It wasn't just local residents in Phoenix either. People in neighboring towns and even military personnel stationed in the area saw these strange phenomena. The lights were said to be arranged in a V-shaped pattern, spanning several miles across the sky. Some reports described the lights as being part of a massive craft that was so large it was almost impossible to comprehend. Others said the lights appeared as separate, smaller orbs or clusters, but the overall image was the same, something massive and inexplicable in the sky. The official explanation from the U.S. military and government was that the lights were caused by flares dropped by military aircraft during training exercises. However, this explanation did not satisfy everyone. Many of the witnesses insisted that the lights they saw were not simply flares, but a solid craft, something far larger and more advanced than anything they had seen before. The lights began to appear around 7:30 p.m. and continued for several hours, with reports coming in from several different locations. While some individuals only saw the lights as a distant glow, others saw a large craft hovering silently above them, blocking out stars and even the moon. The sheer size of the craft, coupled with its apparent ability to fly silently, baffled many of the observers. But here's where things get even more interesting. The lights weren't the only phenomenon reported that night. As the lights moved across the sky, multiple witnesses in various locations began to report seeing a massive triangular craft. This craft was said to be dark, almost black, and it was described as being huge, far larger than any conventional aircraft. It had no visible windows, no lights except for the clusters of glowing orbs that were now moving across the sky, and it made absolutely no noise. The triangular shape was key in many reports. Witnesses said that the craft was so large that it seemed to block out the sky as it moved overhead. The sheer size of the object made it clear that this was no normal aircraft, and the fact that it made no sound led many people to believe it could be a type of craft far beyond anything the public knew about. Some witnesses described the craft as being shaped like a boomerang, while others said it was more of a triangle with lights on each corner. The lights, it seemed, were arranged in a way that gave the craft its distinct shape. They described the lights as steady and not flashing, and they seemed to move slowly across the sky, allowing ample time for people to witness the event. The craft reportedly hovered over parts of Phoenix, Arizona, for nearly 30 minutes, during which time dozens of people observed its strange behavior. One of the most notable accounts came from a man named Joe, who lived just outside Phoenix. He was outside with his family when they saw the lights. Joe described the object as having 6 lights arranged in a perfect V shape, and he said that the lights were extremely bright but did not seem to be any sort of traditional aircraft. What struck him most was the silence. There was absolutely no sound as the lights moved across the sky. He also noted that the lights were not flashing, which is something most witnesses agreed on. As Joe's family watched the lights move overhead, they could feel a sense of awe and unease. The object appeared to be moving very slowly, and at times it even seemed to hover directly above them, casting a large shadow over the area. Joe later commented that he had a strong feeling that the craft was not of this world. The more he thought about it, the less likely he believed the official military explanation of flares being the cause of the lights. Another witness, Stephen, was in Phoenix when the lights passed over the city. He described seeing a massive, dark, triangular object moving silently across the sky with lights on the tips of its triangular shape. Stephen noted that the object moved in a way that defied the usual behavior of aircraft. It moved too slowly and too silently for something that could have been human-made. To Stephen, the lights were the only thing keeping him from believing that it was a UFO. He felt that the craft itself was more solid and tangible, while the lights were almost like an accent. As is often the case with these incidents, the military's initial reaction was to dismiss the idea that anything extraordinary had taken place. In fact, the official statement was that the lights seen over Phoenix were the result of military training exercises in the area, specifically the release of flares by a 10 Warthog aircraft. However, there were several problems with this explanation. Firstly, flares do not behave in the same way that the lights were described by witnesses. Flares fall in a straight line and are typically dropped from a much lower altitude than the lights that were witnessed in Phoenix. The fact that many witnesses saw the lights moving in a V-shape and described the craft as hovering for long periods casts doubt on the idea that flares were involved. The debate continues to this day, with the Phoenix lights becoming a symbol of the enduring mystery surrounding UFOs and the possibility of life beyond Earth. So, what could the Phoenix lights have been? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more content.